You know the feeling. Iron Pineapple has posted another video on Soulslikes you have never heard, saw, smelled, tasted, or felt before. You watch and something in these games is just like... But how did... become... Okay, you can stop that now. Dark Souls was the offspring of... Demon Souls had the basics of everything you'd find and potentially love in the Souls series. But when interviewed about its process, there was another game listed in Fromsoftware's history that goes by the name of Kingsfield for the core inspirations. In an interview from ages ago, Ken Kaji talked about making a successor to Kingsfield. Demon Souls was that sequel. So should we call this new genre a field-like? Fromsoft made the most visually appealing third-person action-adventure game since Zelda hit 3D, and the similarities could be drawn that way. You could also say that Breath of the Wild might even be Souls-like. History said that Zelda was a game you could borrow some inspiration from, and Fromsoftware has sold millions of copies of Dark Souls. But it didn't start that way. It gained more popularity through word of mouth and people playing the games. One game that has been the grandfather of most games in general. That's right. Thank Owlcat Games, who have in close partnership with Games Workshop made Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader a reality. Rogue Trader is a story-rich classical RPG from the same developers of the critically acclaimed game Pathfinder: Wrath of Righteous. If you like games like Baldur's Gate 3, Pillars of Eternity, Dragon Age series, Wasteland 3, The Witcher 3, Divinity Original Sin 2, Diablo 4, or of course, if you're a fan of the Warhammer series at all, you will love this game. I will just go off of some reviews to speak on why you should play this one. On Steam, Capitalisti says, it's the best 40k game so far. Icarus says, Rogue Trader is an absolute masterpiece. Story, lore, characters, environments, and weapons are really well done. If you're a Warhammer fan, this is an easy pickup. If you're not a Warhammer fan and you're looking to try, this is an easy pickup. Thanks to Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader for sponsoring this video, and one fancy transition to more Souls-likes. You've seen Asmongold give a whole monologue on how he's just not gonna kill a boss.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not gonna kill this boss, obviously. I'm gonna call it a day, guys. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Obviously, it hasn't worked, and yeah, I'm just gonna call it a day. I guess I'll try and do this boss again, but like, if I can't kill him again, I'm probably just gonna quit.
But it doesn't really look that hard until you play these games for yourself. If the game didn't look like something to write home about after beating a boss fight with so many memorable moments, you wouldn't have YouTubers talking about it, and the spread of promotion wouldn't cause sales to hit a high point. To make this magical formula that everyone wanted to cash in on, Fromsoftware popularized so many game mechanics. Risk-reward combat, bonfires as checkpoints that reset the enemies in the world as you rest, Estus flasks to allow for a limited amount of healing until death or a bonfire, interconnected level design that makes you go as you see that Firelink Shrine name pop up, deep environmental world building, and storytelling with themes as dark as Berserk, another inspiration for the Souls series. Fromsoft invented a genre from a bunch of different genres that already existed, but by doing this, they were bound to have clones and gatekeeper fans. After the success of Souls, there was a term that predates even Soulslike, the Dark Souls of. Crash Bandicoot and Cuphead all of a sudden were the Dark Souls of platformers. Lawbreakers, leave me a comment if you remember that game, said this about their game.
I think we've kind of made the Dark Souls of competitive first-person shooters.
Spelunky was the Dark Souls of roguelikes. Long Live the Queen became the Dark Souls of social simulators. And thanks to Schlatt, she can't be the Dark Souls of living anymore. If your game had a dark theme or limited heals or a difficult section at all, it was Dark Souls. This tide was rising, and the suits were hungry to make Dark Souls look like some Benjamin Franklins popping out of the cash register. So we enter the mostly dark era of gaming without the souls. The Surge was, as Metacritic described, barely playable, lacked everything that made Souls games and video games in general any good. Combat was repetitive and clunky. There are bugs and clipping all over the place. The level design gave this person a headache. Enemies repetitive. Sprites on the screen are all too small. No emotion, feeling, art direction, or creativity. It is a soulless mess. Other games suffered this soulless fate, like the original Lords of the Fallen, a game so misguided and directionless that its new version didn't even put a 2. Instead, it was Lords of the Fallen again, because everybody is going to forget about the first one. Lords of the Fallen and The Surge were cashing in on the trend without either innovating or understanding why people like Dark Souls. But not all games in this era were bad. In fact, Nioh was pretty great. Remnant was Dark Souls with guns, and that might be an oversimplification, but how else am I going to convince the Souls-only crowd to give this one a shot? These games embraced being Souls when they needed to, but the extra depth was still missing. I didn't find Nioh's combat or world as interesting, and Remnant, while a great concept, didn't look as pleasing to watch a friend play it. I didn't want to jump into it for myself at first. Maybe people weren't ready for Soulslike quite yet. Only one game in this era that got compared to Dark Souls a lot held up to be timeless. This game became so popular that there's still no sequel to this day. Good one, Team Cherry. You can release Silksong now. Hollow Knight was compared to Souls for its focus on combat, weighted healing, environments, story depth, and it created its own legacy to follow. The first Souls-like Metroidvania. Game Maker's Toolkit, or Mark Brown, made a really great video on if Souls-like should become a genre in 2017, pointing to every FPS at the time being a Doom clone, and how the progression of the genre followed a very similar path to Souls-likes. He used a lot of examples of other genres, but he made it clear to not call it Souls-like. Fortunately or unfortunately, his video might have prophesized the term. A couple of years later, an Iron Pineapple. Ification.
Boo! You suck!
I think it's safe to say our favorite spiky fruit man has had so much impact on the popularity of the term Souls-like with his series on playing Souls-likes you've never heard of. This has spawned so many videos that have a lot of views on YouTube and created so much popularity for the term that I think people are very much down with Souls-like. Whereas Dark Souls of was an annoying term that turned you off of those games, Souls-like is here to stay. Sorry, Mark Brown. Set aside the YouTuber success, and one very basic reason Souls-like has stuck, because Fromsoft has been the biggest example of proving the concept. You could say that Fromsoft has really just made Souls-like since Demon Souls. Bloodborne, Sekiro, Elden Ring, hell, even Armored Core 6 shares a lot of DNA from Dark Souls. So if Fromsoftware wants to share DNA in games with different names and their commercial successes, then why should anyone else feel bad for trying to adopt their own version of Souls-like? And that is exactly what they did. In 2022, Elden Ring shared so much DNA of other Fromsoftware games we listed that you could really call it a celebration of their older games, with veteran Souls players not liking Elden Ring as much as someone who just got into a Fromsoftware game. With over 20 million units sold in just a month from their launch, Fromsoftware made their largest game to date. Elden Ring was their golden goose. And if 2022 was the year of Elden Ring, then 2022 should also be called the year of Souls-likes. Interest over time says the search term Souls-like is at an all-time high, and there's a reason for that. Elden Ring is clearly when a large spike happened, but other games have kept the term flourishing. Whenever somebody feels awkward about liking a game that is a Souls-like, I always tell them one thing. Fromsoft may have created their own light bulb, but it doesn't mean other companies can't innovate and keep the lights on in their own way. You noticed what I noticed. You might not want to admit it, but a game called does some stuff better than its teacher. A game so faithful, you might call it a little bit too faithful. But if we are to coin Souls-like as a genre and not a trend, then this is one of the best games in that genre. Lies of P has innovated greatly from its teacher. You're fighting in a dark setting with rich environments and rewarding gameplay. But Lies of P took elements from Bloodborne's trick weapon system with the rewarding block timing of Sekiro, while adding new elements like the rewarded heal for perfect blocks, grindstone for elementals, a passive wheel of upgrades, the rally system from Bloodborne returned but in its own way with Lies of P. It is the offspring and innovation of Souls-likes, and thankfully, people took notice, as Lies of P has sold over 1 million copies. On the other hand, there's still some bumps in innovation. Lords of the Fallen, the new one, had a lot of great ideas spread in a game that wasn't finished. It's like if Dark Souls 2 had some creative new ideas. It's still Dark Souls 2 with enemy spam and some odd hitbox moments, but I think the lamp mechanic of the underworld, some of the classes to unlock, different endings, and some really special boss fight mechanics make it worth playing alone. More time in the oven, and you have a Souls-like that might outshine the rest. Then we have Blasphemous 2, which I haven't played, but everyone loved it. I will not stop talking about Remnant 2, a blend of roguelike random generated progression, looter shooter grinding materials, and boss interactions for extra loot. You have secrets around every corner. You have that Souls-like rich environment and rewarding gameplay. It is the offspring of so many genres, the list might go off the screen. These games are understanding the formula better than ever, and it's no wonder that Souls-like has changed gaming forever. You will now hear the term all the time, and I hope the creators keep talking about them. I hope that you keep buying into them, because if you're like me and you love Fromsoftware games, Souls-like isn't a bad thing. It only creates more competition and more innovation. Silksong, the joke's over. You can just release now. We will stop calling you a Souls-like. Maybe. I'll see you next time. Make sure to subscribe for more Souls-like.